What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another video. So one of the most important things you can do when you're trying to get better at Fortnite is obviously to become an insane fighter. Whether you're trying to gain arena points, place higher in tournaments, or even just win regular games, you're gonna run into people and you're gonna have to win. So with that in mind, guys, in today's video, I'm gonna be showing you guys step by step how to actually practice in order to become an insane fighter in Fortnite. This video is not gonna be about specific things like the best loadout or the best weapons or anything like that. It's gonna be more so about how to actually practice and improve, and stuff that applies to every meta. Before we get into it though, if you go on to enjoy this video or if it helps you out, then be sure to drop a like on it. As well as that, if you want to see more tips and tricks content just like this in the future, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. And finally, if you want to show some extra support, then it would really mean a lot if you could use code TECHO in the item shop. It takes like 5 seconds to type in and it seriously does help me out a bunch. So as always, a massive thank you to everyone who uses it. But with all that said, and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So getting into our first tip for this video, and the first thing I want to talk about is your in-game practice. Essentially, in-game practice refers to whatever you do in regular games. A huge portion of your improvement is simply going to come from the type of practice that you get while you're playing, which means you're going to want to optimize this to get the best practice possible. When I talk about in-game practice, I basically mean your stuff like arena, your public matches, your tournaments, or whatever you do that's just a regular old game of Fortnite. And one of the most common mistakes that I see people make is they want to get good at fighting, they want to get better at the game, but the standards they actually set for their in-game practice are so low. They play mostly pubs, or they just sit around not playing regular games at all and just hang around in creative. Obviously, I'm sure that doesn't apply to most of you guys because you're actually trying to improve at the game, but a lot of people will just sit in pubs or sit in zero build or something like that and not really make much progress. So that's why for in-game practice, I recommend you prioritize two things. You want to prioritize arena, and you want to prioritize potentially tournaments. Arena is a pretty obvious one. It's going to put you up against much better players you can queue up whenever you want to. Tournaments is mostly going to be for people who actually set their sights on competitive, and it's going to give you actual practice and experience in that environment, which is super useful. All things considered, these are going to put you up against much better players in much more difficult environments and give you much more to adapt to. So overall, focusing on arena and potentially focusing on tournaments is going to be a massive help. Another tip I have for you guys relating to in-game practice is simply to play aggressive. As you can probably expect, the simplest way to improve at fighting is just to do more of it. Although the arena point system does punish aggressive playstyles, and frankly, if you push everybody, you're probably going to lose points. But in the end, you can always grind for points later if that's your ultimate goal, but getting into more fights is the best thing you can do for your own improvement. So focus on getting into fights now, and if you want to worry about arena points later, then go ahead. Getting into our second section though, and this one is going to be all about mechanical practice. As with your in-game practice, mechanical practice does play a very foundational role, because to put it simply, if you're getting into all these fights in a regular game but you can't build and edit properly, then you're basically going to get rocked every single fight. Now there are going to be a couple of methods I recommend to do this, but the primary methods are going to be things like piece control maps, edit maps, and other maps by people like Raider464, Tito, and others. It's ultimately going to be up to you to figure out which maps work best for you, but putting a solid amount of time in to build up your mechanical skill is going to be extremely helpful long term. The way I like to look at it is like this. The mechanical abilities you build up through stuff like creative, piece control maps, edit maps, build maps, all that stuff is pretty much like the foundation of a house, because you can't really do well in regular fights unless you're able to do that stuff. But actually getting into fights and experiencing them is what's going to build that house up. It's going to build your game sense in fights, your general ability to kind of scope out situations and whatnot. It's going to build that whole mental side of it, as well as help you apply the stuff you learn mechanically. So you really can't have one without the other is what I'm trying to say. But one issue is that a lot of people tend to overdo this stuff. They tend to play way too much mechanics maps and really don't make much progress because they can't actually apply it in their real games. So I do recommend that the average player puts about 20% of their total playing time into mechanical maps. This can vary a bit, and I recommend beginners go for more like 30% as they try to build up that foundation. Of course, if you don't know how to build or edit or anything like that, you're probably going to want to spend the majority of your time in creative trying to figure that out. But as you get more advanced, you can go for less and less time in there and still build up your mechanical skill, but focus mostly on in-game. Now there is a lot to cover in this video, but I do want to give you guys some good maps. I won't go over the maps in detail. These are actually the maps that I put in my recent creative maps video. So if you do want a lot of detail about them, then you can go ahead and look there. But with that said, I'll go ahead and put some of my favorite mechanics maps on screen so you guys can try them out. On top is going to be Raiders Mechanics Training Map V3, which helps you apply editing and building in a bunch of different scenarios. Below that is going to be Raiders Piece Control Map V3. This one basically just has piece control scenarios, which help you box up an opponent and get really good at close range fighting. And finally, you've got Flea's Editing Dictionary on the bottom. This one's more for like beginner to intermediate players, and this one helps a lot with just building that muscle memory you need to edit fast and consistent. So with that said, those 3 maps should help you guys out. With that said, getting into the third section of today's video, and this one is going to be all about aim training. A lot of people nowadays can do all sorts of stuff in Fortnite. They can build super fast, they can edit everything, they can do these crazy retakes and all this fancy stuff, but one thing that a lot of people miss out on is their aim. Regardless of what your goal is in Fortnite, whether you're trying to play competitive, whether you're trying to play pubs, or even if you're trying to play zero build or something like that, good good aim is going to be one of the most foundational things that you can have. Just think about it like this. You can do the most fancy piece control technique in the world, do every single thing right, but if you can't hit a shot, then you are going to lose every single fight. Now, of course, that is an exaggeration, and most of you guys aren't going to lose every single fight if you have bad aim, but the fact of the matter is it's very, very important, and we do want to work on it. Being able to hit your shots consistently, even in difficult situations, makes you so much harder to deal with during fights and makes aim training so important. So generally, I'm going to recommend aim training as part of your warm-up and doing anywhere between 15 minutes to about 45 minutes, depending on your skill level and experience. A beginner is going to need much less, just a little bit of practice to see a big difference, whereas someone who's advanced is going to need an absolute ton of practice. With that said, consistent aim training is definitely one of the most important things you can do if you're trying to become a crazy fighter in Fortnite. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and put up 2 codes on screen. These are going to be the 2 of my favorite aim maps right now. On top is going to be Raider 464's aim training map. This one has a bunch of simulated aim duels and stuff like that, and just regular scenarios you can use. These are just going to help you build a bunch of muscle memory when it comes to your aim and apply it to fairly realistic situations. And on the bottom is going to be Panville's headshot only box fight. This one has the Havoc shotgun, and it's basically going to help you be able to line up your shots with your shotgun and be super accurate. In this map, you're actually not able to get a kill unless you hit them directly in the head for full damage, which means you really have to actually take your time and be accurate and hit your shots. And that's a habit that is so important that so many players miss out on nowadays, so it's something you really want to work on. So with that in mind, both of these maps hand in hand should make a massive difference in your aim. Finally, guys, getting into our last section for today's video, and this one is going to be all about fighting practice. Specifically, I'll be talking about fighting practice in creative. Although I recommend spending the bulk of your time in regular games, there's also no doubt that fighting practice in creative is super useful since you're able to get way more fights in with way less time. Not only that, but you can actually optimize what you're doing. For example, you can focus more on box fights, build fights, you can do just regular realistic fights, or basically any combination. In creative, unless you have a very specific weakness for something like box fights or build fights, I am going to recommend that you spend the bulk of your time practicing in a realistic environment. This can be something like a zone war, a realistic 1v1, or even a realistic 1v1 box fight. Raider 464 made a map for realistic 1v1 box fights, and it very quickly became one of the most popular maps in the game. This is because it gives you that realistic environment, but it helps you focus on that close range fighting, which is super prevalent and competitive and whatnot. And obviously, in a regular game, you really don't want to crank up to height limit and waste all your materials on a build fight. So that map kind of balances things out and makes it slightly more realistic. The regular realistic 1v1 and the realistic 1v1 box fight are pretty similar. The only real difference is the realistic 1v1 box fight is in a big box, but I do recommend doing both of those. Now, regarding who to actually play with, I am going to recommend you just hop into random matchmaking unless you have a specific friend you want to go up against. Or if you find yourself just stomping on everybody in random matchmaking, then you can actually look for someone in a scrim server or something like that. And as a side note, if you guys do need somebody to play with, you can go ahead and check out my Discord server, which is going to be linked down in the description. In that server, all you got to do is select your region and you'll gain access to a bunch of looking for group chats. You can use those to find people to 1v1 against, to play with, or whatever else. So once again, if you want to check out that Discord, it's going to be down in the description. Now, one tip I have for you guys is in creative, play the way you would want to play in real fights. Overall, our goal is to get better at fighting in the real game, so we should try to make our creative practice resemble that. That means you want to maintain pressure on your opponent, you want to go for intelligent plays, and try to go for outplays rather than just using pure aggression. After doing a lot of creative 1v1s, I think a lot of us have a tendency to kind of just slow down and not really think too much about what we're doing. But if you want to get really good at fighting in regular games, then you want to make your creative practice resemble that as much as possible. So although it's easy to kind of get sidetracked and not really think about it, you do want to try to stay focused and play like you would in a real game. As well as that, you can feel free to try out new techniques or strategies, of course, since that's a huge part of improving at the game. Although you want to play as well as you can and try to get the kill, you can also try out some new stuff because ultimately creative is going to be where you're going to want to do that. But overall, guys, hopefully that helps you out. But with all that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on how to become a crazy fighter in Fortnite Chapter 4 Season 2 and future seasons. Overall, by using all the practice methods in this video and optimizing your gameplay to basically get the most progress possible, you should find yourself getting way better at the game really fast. If you found this video helpful, then be sure to drop a like on it. And if you want to see more content just like this in the future, then feel free to hit that subscribe button. I post an absolute ton of tips and tricks content on this channel, so if you want to see more of it, then you know what to do. And finally, guys, if you want to show some extra support, it would really mean a lot to me if you could use code TECHO in the item shop. It's 100% free for you, and it only takes like 5 seconds to type in, and it seriously does help me out a bunch. As always, a huge thank you to everyone who uses it. But with all that said, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.